It's April the 12th, 2023, and we're reading Psalm 127 today, a song of ascents of Solomon, it says. Unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the watchmen stand guard in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves. Sons are a heritage from the Lord, children a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are sons born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their enemies in the gate. Amen. Well, we saw yesterday in Psalm 126 a principle which I think is here again in this psalm and goes right through the Bible. We saw yesterday it wasn't prayer alone, God must do it, and it wasn't work alone, we must do it. It was rather God must do it, but he has decided and committed himself to doing his work in a particular way, in a very special way, through his workers, through his people. The analogy there was farming. The analogy here now is building, which again makes sense when you think that this psalm is ascribed to Solomon, the man who had the vision to build the temple. That's really what we're talking about here. Unless the Lord builds the house, its builders labor in vain. Now, the house is, and the city that's mentioned in verse 1, this is the temple in Jerusalem at the time of Solomon. And it didn't just fall out of heaven, did it? Solomon didn't click his fingers and there it was. That's not the way God works. He works through builders called and appointed and anointed by him. But he must work through those workers. If he doesn't, it's all in vain. It's all going to collapse eventually. So the principle is that we do it in his way, for his glory. We keep close to him. We follow his plans, his leadership, his direction. We are humble and prayerful, but also we must work. Building, farming, these are pretty gritty things. We get our hands dirty doing the Lord's work. He builds, he's the builder, but he does it through us. So that's how the temple was to be built. That's how Jerusalem, the city, was to be prospered and built up. That's how the human race is going to be developed, verses 3 to 5. There's obviously an echo here in the reference to children and to the blessing of children, verse 5, going right back to the beginning, right back to Genesis 1. That's how God set it up at the beginning. He created all things. So all things are from God and for his glory. Of course. But he has decided, again, he has a plan, he has a program whereby he creates us as human beings with agency, with responsibility, with powers, with gifts, which we are to use in his service and for his glory. That's how the city develops. That's how a community develops. That's how a family develops. Because we are the ones, to a large degree, who decide, shall I get married? Shall we have children? how many children. There's a mystery here, but to a large degree, that's within our grasp to decide that and to do that. But of course, unless the Lord gives us children, verse 3, they are a reward from him. They are a blessing, verse 5. Unless God gifts us, it will never happen. And marriage and family and community and the whole human race. The Lord created the world. He created the first humans, Adam and Eve, and he said, be fruitful and multiply. And that's why we're here today. The human race has this role and has this responsibility to have children, to cultivate family life, to cause the community, the world, to flourish. It's all of God, and it's all for the glory of God. And yet we have those roles and those responsibilities clearly marked out for us. It's not an either or, it's not one or the other. If you go down on one side of the line, you'll end up in a disastrous situation. If we say it's all of God, then we'll become irresponsible and we'll kind of shrivel up as human beings. If we say it's all of man, we'll become arrogant and full of ourselves and we'll reject God. And we'll be like Babel building the tower up to heaven, and we will be judged. There is a fine line. It's like walking a tightrope, a very fine line between the two. So the city, the temple, the human race, and the church, the principle applies precisely in the same way in the church. And nowhere does Paul spell this out better than in 1 Corinthians 3, verses 6 to 9. Listen to this, and you'll hear it in almost every word. I planted the seed, Apollos watered it, but God made it grow. So neither he who plants nor he who waters is anything, but only God who makes things grow. The man who plants and the man who waters have one purpose, and each will be rewarded according to his own labor. For we are God's fellow workers. You are God's field, God's building.